welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As always, I am joined with Nathan, and we've already got huge smiles on our faces because on this episode, we will be discussing Middlesbrough 2, Blackburn 0. The game was boxed off on Friday evening. We had the weekend to relax, and for the most part, couldn't have really got better results as well. So at the moment, after what felt like during that losing streak, an absolute chore doing this podcast, we're finally getting to the point where some of these podcasts at the moment can be full of smiles, full of laughter, and basically just waxing lyrical about some of the wonderful footballers that Middlesbrough have on offer at the moment. Nathan, I know you've been busy working all weekend, but as I say, you've always got that extra spring in your step when you the Friday night kickoff and your job is done and dusted and you can basically put your feet up, can't you?
Oh, yeah, 100%. It was a massive win on Friday night. Firstly, laying down a marker to the rest of the teams in and around us to say, right, over to you. Seeing us in fifth position at the end of play and now at the end of the weekend is incredible, really, from where we were at the start of even this period of games after the international break. And yeah, I'm going to be honest, I stepped into work on Saturday morning and I was very, very close to booking a weekend off in the end of May.
I'm not quite at that point just yet, but maybe if we get a result against Leeds, I might start just checking booking.com just in case. As you say, the win in general, it was a huge statement of intent. It was basically laying down a marker, as you say, in the sense of this felt very much, and we spoke about it last podcast, like a game that Middlesbrough this season, Middlesbrough under Michael Carrick, if we're going to be fair, for the most part, probably if you take away the first season in charge, it felt like the exact type of game where they just let you down. And it sounds really harsh, but it's the truth. There was planned sort of protests against the owners and the hierarchy at Blackburn. Of course, we'll get onto that still image of Rudy Gestede looking bewildered as the second one rolled into the back of the net. But yeah, I mean, some people just were kind of, I guess, voting with their feet, not going. Blackburn fans just saying, I no longer kind of want to put money in the Venky's pockets and I'm just not going to go to the game. There was basically a statement to say that their owners were going to go to the games and hierarchy, despite the fact that supporters had basically made it quite apparent that if you do turn up, you're going to be greeted with a bucket load of abuse. So just prepare yourselves, stay away. We would advise you to. And there was shades of Charlton, wasn't there? Not quite tennis balls on the pitch, but it did feel like if Middlesbrough could get an early goal, then the atmosphere would just go straight away. It was going to become toxic. It was going to become basically what was happening on the pitch was going to become almost play second fiddle because everything else was going to be directed at that at the director's box. And I think it would be fair to say if there could have been a piece of paper passed round Middlesbrough supporters prior to kick-off and that just said, right on the piece of paper, the best opening 5 minutes that you could possibly imagine. I think it was pretty much what would have been on all of those pieces of paper, to be honest, Nathan, because it was just ideal, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, ridiculous, really, after everything that you've just said there, Chris. To get an early goal would be massive in the opening 10 minutes, and we got two, which just killed everything, really. Yeah, it was really, really good, the start to the game. Sort of wasn't a case of trying to get a foothold in the game or anything. It was simply, as Hayden Hackney said post-match, we didn't really know what to expect from Blackburn. So we're just going to attack them and see what they're made of. And with our first attack of the game, a really, really, really good goal as well in terms of the build-up. But it's all about Tommy Conway receiving the ball with his back to goal, flicking it over the Blackburn defender's head, looking up to the goal, and just burying it with his left foot on the half volley into the back of the net. You came on this podcast last week and talked about Neto Borges' goal being possibly the best goal of the season that we've scored. Has the one after that matched it or bettered it?
Well, I've been thinking about this since the moment that it went in. It basically like a light bulb went off in my head, that quote that I said in last podcast. Of course, it was always going to happen. I think that's my new goal of the season, to be honest. One game later, and I've already changed my mind. But yeah, I mean, as you say, not only the context around what a good start it was, I mean, what a goal. It is, everyone's made the obvious comparison to Bergkamp. And honestly, I think skill wise, okay, yes, it's probably not going to be shown on daytime Sky television like every 30 seconds, like what that Premier League year seems to be. But it's it is just an absolutely sensational bit of forward play from a really, really good striker at this level, I must say. I want to touch on Tommy Conway, but I mean, firstly, just touching on the goal, that little link up, as much as I hate to say it, that little front two pairing are starting to grow on me. I mean, I've always loved Tommy Conway since the moment he signed, to be honest, but Iheanacho and him, there seems to be, from obviously social media footage that we saw during the week, a little bit of a bromance growing there where, you know, Tommy Conway is really, really willing Kelechi Iheanacho to find his form. And okay, yes, I'm not going to get drawn on his performance, but if you want to look at the stats, and if we're giving Illing Jr. the goal, which he can have it, in my book, it's his goal. 2 assists for Iheanacho. As you say, the touch, the bit of skill to get away from, I think it's Rankin Costello, literally the phrase like sent him for a hot dog doesn't even do it justice. It was a hot dog, a paper, a coffee, and a packet of minstrels, to be honest, that he's been sent for, because he's in a different planet by the time Tommy Conway's getting his shot away. And weak foot, as you say, half volley, it is emphatic, and he matches it with an absolutely extraordinary knee slide as well, by the way. It is, well, I talked up Neto's goal last week. That goal is better for me already. It is an absolutely beautiful finish, and as I say, the perfect possible way to start the game on Friday evening.
Yeah, and very quickly it became two, didn't it? And again, it's Boro. We weren't necessarily even free flowing for this second goal. It was just that we found ourselves in an attacking position. Obviously, Bergzorg down the right hand side looks a little bit unorthodox, I think, and he has done the last couple of weeks as well, especially because I think as a predominantly left-sided player that wants to cut in on his right side, he still tries to cut in on his left at times.
Yeah.
He chops back in this instance, cuts it back for Iheanacho, who sort of delays and then knocks it to the edge of the box. And I think that sometimes in games this season, we've been on the receiving end of bits of good fortune falling for the opposition. And on a night where Blackburn were already struggling with the fans on their back, conceding that early goal with inside a minute or 2 minutes, and then this comes up in which Ilin Jr. comes flying in with his right foot. It's going way, way wide, and ex-Boro player Danny Bart bullets a header into the centre of the goal past ex-Boro goalkeeper Ainsley Pears. It is just like the stars aligned for Boro a little bit. And finally, for once this season, we can say that we got the better of Blackburn Rovers. It is very, very nice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it feels like forever since we've been able to say that. And as you say, it did feel a little bit like almost untypical Borough. The fact that it felt almost routine. There was no real panic. I mean, we'll move on to the second half, and the performance certainly did drop off. But I mean, we were never really uncomfortable in the game. There was a few spells where you know we perhaps fell off it in terms of like intensity and kind of just retaining the ball, making silly little passes and silly little errors. But, as I say, we were never uncomfortable. But in that first half, especially in the in the in the first half of the first half, every time we went forward, we looked like we were going to score. And I think even at 2-0, I think relatively soon after Ilan Jr.'s goal or Bart's own goal or whatever, Iheanacho has a really good chance, which he kind of gets wrong a little bit, which should be 3. And even then, perhaps not as clear cut. We had a few instances where, like you say, it was a case of like the wrong decision. Just Hackney went for a few shots from when he probably could have slipped Bergsorg in. Bergsorg a few times just dilly-dallied a little bit. Azaz had a couple of them as well. But yeah, it was almost like we were just in dreamland. I mean, it couldn't have gone any better. We went 2-0 up, and it kind of just felt straight away, to be honest, I was sat at home thinking, this could end up being 5 or 6. Yeah, we could really, really, really improve the goal difference. And I mean, I was not going into the game expecting that was going to be the case. I thought that it was an ideal time to play Blackburn, but don't get me wrong, I think Blackburn were pretty horrendous on the night, but it's sometimes easy to say, well, the other team were just shit and not give credit to your own team. I thought we started really well. And to be honest, for the full night, I think, and basically there's a bit of a like sort of narrative around when Finn Azaz plays well, this Middlesbrough team play well. I actually think, yes, that's possibly true. I actually think there's 2 way more important people in this team, and it's the 2 in midfield. Because when Aidan Morris and Hayden Hackney are on it, I don't think you get a better midfield pairing in the league. They were just everywhere. And I mean, we'll get on to Hackney and obviously the kind of form that he's in really since he's returned from getting his first goal with England. But Aidan Morris on Friday night won the most duels in the match, 14, was the most accurate passer in the match, 92%, and then was also the most fouled player in the match, which I did have me fingers in mouth biting me nails a few times because he did seem to be on the ground an awful lot. People were just kicking him. They couldn't get near him. But yeah, I thought the first half performance, especially the intensity, just being on the front foot, playing through the lines. I think I saw this morning that Hayden Hackney across the top 5 leagues in Europe has the most progressive passes out of anyone. And you saw why on Friday, because every time the pair of them, Aidan Morris was sweeping things up, nipping at heels, winning the ball back, giving it to Hackney, and Hackney was just had one thought in his mind: get the ball forward and let's attack Blackburn, as you said, really. And it was, those 2 were sensational on Friday night.
Yeah, I think especially in the case of Hackney, it's a case of just enjoying while he's here because
Yeah,
I don't think he's going to be here very much longer. If I'm honest, he is truly a level above the championship, really, for everything that he's got in his game, his calmness, his composure on the ball, his ability to make the right decisions in terms of when he's pressed, either just knocking it off into Morris or into a centre half, or sometimes faking to do that and then driving through the centre of midfield with the ball and looking to, as you say, progress us forward. He is truly different class. And I think on the whole, a very untypical Boro display given the circumstances around the game and around Blackburn. But something that was typical Boro, which was a little bit unfortunate, is Neto Borges going down in the first half after a foul from Maktar Gay, who goes up, big elbow across Borges' chest, and just on his landing, you can see that Neto's in a lot of pain the way that he lands on his ankle. So fingers crossed, it's a case of his ankle's blown up a little bit, but he'll be back relatively soon because I think even in the first half an hour that he was on the pitch on Friday night, I thought that Borges was fantastic. At times, just driving through the centre of the pitch, and yeah, just looks very comfortable both aerially against centre forwards like Gay, 6'5", big physical presence up front, But yeah, his partnership with Howson over the last couple of weeks has definitely progressed, and it's played a massive part in Boro looking as comfortable as they have really in this sort of mini run of games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've already kind of said it really, but fingers crossed as long as Neto Borges isn't a serious one. I think now moving forwards, I'm even looking at next season, regardless of what happens. I think for me, you've got to now look at Neto Borges as a centre back that can play left back. His levels of performance since moving there have been that good, and I know obviously Howson's been phenomenal as well. Was excellent again, but you've got the age factor. You've got the fact that he may well pick up more injuries with the age. I think Neto Borges he gives you, and a lot of people were sort of rightfully so saying, why did we get rid of Matt Clark? More so just down to numbers, really. But I think one of the main issues that we've missed is having that balance of having a left foot, and especially with a left back in Samuel Illing Jr. that likes to bomb on, having that split second to just naturally play in front of someone for Illing Jr. to run onto the ball, continue attacks down the left, without having that. I think we've touched on it previously, but without having Vandenberg, for example, chop on inside, then kind of think, do I really want to play this pass? The angle's not great. Having the balance of that left foot is a real addition to the back line. And it absolutely helps in terms of creating angles for passes. Yeah, it will be it was a real worry. And I was genuinely quite gutted. And I shouldn't have been, because obviously we were 2-0 up, flying, performing really well. And it was fairly routine, but it did kind of, it made me absolutely gutted, to be honest, because he's been such a good character. And the thing is, like Neto Borges, the type of character we've come to expect from him, he tried 2 or 3 times to sort of run it off, hobbled about a bit, and then eventually it was kind of one of them where he just thought, I can't really continue, unfortunately. But I actually felt, and even moving into the second half, I actually felt that it was nice to see Rav Vandenberg back, and nice to see Rav Vandenberg doing exactly what won him player of the season, young player of the season last year. I thought Vandenberg was very good when he come on, especially up against 2 quite physical forwards, really, really dominant in the air. Of course, you do lack the left foot, but looked a lot more like the Rav Vandenberg that we know, not the one that's been devoid of confidence and not great during parts of this season.
Yeah, I think that the thing that sort of just stands out to me about his performance was when he came on, he wasn't really under any danger, but the danger that he was under in some instances, balls being played up the line, he just dealt with it, shielded off a Blackburn attacker, out for a goal kick, out for a throw in, and just easing Rav Vandenberg back to full fitness is nice to be able to do rather than obviously rushing him back. Ideally, this week, as we sort of know, we'll hopefully see Edmondson and or Fry return to the squad, whether that's against Leeds on Tuesday night or whether it's against Millwall next Saturday. I don't know quite yet, but having those back as well, just to be able to ease some bodies back is going to be big for us, I think, for the next sort of 6 games that are left of the season, to be able to not necessarily rotate, but to be able to slowly bed these players back in rather than, okay, we haven't got any centre halves, we're just going to hide these guys back into the 11. I suppose with that, a lot of praise has to go to Johnny Howson to be able to manage 90 after 90 at 36 years old, and just he just doesn't look under any sort of pressure. He flying into tackles on Friday night, sort of being able to read the game from centre half is a position which I didn't necessarily fully appreciate Johnny Elson being able to play, but in instances, being able to read the game and read the flight of the ball, nip in front of an attacker, and then just literally just take the ball in his stride and play forward. It is phenomenal to be able to watch Johnny Howson. But in terms of all of our three centre halves that played a part on Friday evening, I think the biggest compliment that can go to all of them is you didn't really hear any of the names mentioned on Sky Sports commentary, and that's a positive sign that you just
Yeah,
getting on with the jobs, and yeah, it doesn't go unnoticed.
yeah, absolutely. And as you say, he's got a certain level of being able to read the game in terms of nipping in front of strikers and basically getting Boro on the front foot by just basically being smarter than his opponent at times. But actually, which is not necessarily something that I've not been aware of, but potentially not been aware of to the extent of how good he is. He's got an absolute leap on him, Johnny Howson. And what is he? 5'11", maybe he's 5'10".
Yeah, yeah,
He's certainly not 6 foot. I don't think. I'm saying that. I don't think he may be. I might have made myself look a little bit silly there. But in terms of playing against the forwards, as I say, that both him and Vandenberg were up against, he's got a real leap, and he kind of rarely loses a header, especially second balls. He's always one of the ones to kind of go and meet it and go and attack the ball and head it clear. In terms of the second half, Nathan, I must admit it was. I don't want to criticize them too much because I think, to be honest, it was understandable that a little bit of complacency was going to creep in. And I think it got to the point, and I messaged you exactly on 55 minutes, the camera panned to Carrick, and he was basically as animated as what I've seen him ever, really. He was really getting his message across to say, come on, lads, you need to lift this again. There's a few little sloppy passes creeping in. There's a few that little bit of momentum just starting to build, a few crosses into the box. And again, nothing where I was kind of like hiding behind the sofa thinking, oh dear. But there was a little bit of a drop off in terms of levels second half. I think for probably 20, 25 minutes. And Carrick, in fairness to him, I guess somewhat of a peek behind the curtain in terms of potentially what he is actually like behind the scenes, because I have been, and a lot of people are quick to say, I just can't imagine him going in at halftime and like really bollocking someone. But I mean, it was very, very apparent to see how unhappy he was with the way things were heading when it did reach 55 minutes, as I say.
yeah, and as well as that, I obviously remember the message from you at that time to point that out. But what also pleased me was around that same period, it was probably at that exact same point we had a little bit of pressure, didn't we, to deal with a couple of crosses in the box, a couple of half chances. Mark Travers just sat down in his box and held his ankle for 2 seconds, and it just sort of I can't remember if the physios came on, but the referee certainly came over to check on him, and it was just sort of a delay for another 30 seconds or so, but just stemming
It's
any
just
sort
being
of
clever,
momentum.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's just being clever and just being sort of in tune with understanding where the momentum in the game is at that point. So yeah, props to Travers for that as well. And I thought that with what he had to deal with on Friday night, which look, it wasn't a lot, but a couple of crosses into the box, a couple of times where he was contested with those crosses, he's just so comfortable, so comfortable. He is a fantastic goalkeeper at this level. And yeah, it makes a massive difference, especially for me as a fan, being able to sit there on Sky and watch it on Friday night and just not feel really at any danger, even when Blackburn are having a couple of efforts with Mark Travers in goal. I feel safe, and
Yeah, yeah.
that'll be your meme. Yeah, with Mark Travers in goal, I feel safe. So
It's a
there you
nice
go.
feeling, isn't it? After some relatively questionable keepers over the years at Middlesbrough. It is when you have a Mark Travers or a Darren Randolph in goal, it's a lovely feeling, to be honest, because when you are 2-0 up, you don't start thinking. I mean, I never rule it out because it's Middlesbrough at the end of the day, but crosses into the box, long throws. There's a level of confidence that you have in Mark Travers, and yeah, I mean, I said it last week. I think he's undoubtedly in the conversation for one of the best goalkeepers in the division, and whatever he costs, let's just get that done nice and early for next season. Because even if, do you know what? I'm sure it will be a signing that we would make if we do somehow end up falling into the Premier League by accident. But I think his level of goalkeeping and just doing the basics of what a goalkeeper should do, he does them to a standard where it would translate straight away into the Premier League. I would be more than happy if he was our goalkeeper, if we did somehow end up in the Premier League, as I say. But yeah, I guess just in terms of the closing stages of the games and a few talking points, a few things that did annoy me a little bit, if I'm going to kind of really sort of like finally pick things out. Little bit of, I don't want to say being greedy or just people playing for themselves.
There was instances definitely of it. Azaz, Ian,
Yeah.
those two stand out as being greedy. Conway had one where he launched one over the bar as well, and the one that stands out, which not isn't being greedy, but it's just that final ball. Bergzorg 2v1, and
He's got to shoot, hasn't he?
but he's not even picked his head up to when he's passed it. He hasn't even picked his head up to see where Conway is alongside him. He's just really poor. And in fairness to him, he has said on his Instagram, "P.S. I know I have to do better in that situation," which he does. He has to do better in that situation, 100 million%. But for the second half, it was a relative non-event, really, wasn't it? There wasn't a
Yeah.
whole lot that went on. We had a couple of chances in terms of players ballooning efforts over the bar. There was Morgan Whittaker came on off the bench and provided us with a little bit of skill, which was fantastic for an Instagram reel. A couple of nice cameos, very short cameos off the bench from Whittaker in the last 2 weeks. So hopefully we see him providing a little bit of a bigger impact in the next couple of games. But yeah, it was pleasing just to be able to sail into that lead on Friday night and just be comfortable throughout the entire game, perhaps even taking our foot off the gas a little bit in the second half, especially, will hopefully have conserved a little bit of energy for the coming week in which we have our, I think if I'm right, it's our final 3 game week of the season. If you ignore your Good Friday, Easter Monday week, but yeah, a final traditional Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday or Friday, Tuesday, Saturday.
Yeah, we're at the exciting part of the season now, aren't we? The run-in. I'm not going to make the gag about all those cliches again, but yeah, it's the exciting part of the season, and it's what the weather starts getting nicer. It's a little bit brighter on an evening, and it usually means there's more on the line, there's more to play for, and there's potential for people to become heroes. And just before we do move on to Leeds and Millwall, we're not going to kind of go fully in depth in terms of each individual award. We've spoken about goal of the season, but genuinely, to be honest, because I said I was going to, and we've moved on since, but I just wanted to say on Tommy Conway, there was a lot of skepticism around selling Emmanuel Latila for different reasons, granted. And, there was very much, this club can't be taken seriously if we're going to sell our top goal scorer in January, regardless of the price. And that effectively ends the season as some of the statements, which were utterly ridiculous at the time anyway. Even if I thought we were going to get in the playoffs, writing off a season in January because of one player going was mental. But in terms of at the moment, probably one of my go-tos for potentially voting player of the season. And also just a special mention to him. Tommy Conway is becoming as good of a striker as what there is in this division. I really honestly do think that. His press is relentless. And yes, okay, sometimes he doesn't make the wisest of decisions. Sometimes he does. He is a little bit well, I don't think there's anything wrong with a few of the times that he's shot on Friday night, but you know, he's not the finished article just yet. But in terms of his work rate, his quality, it's not just like one of those players that becomes a cult hero because he runs around a lot, but actually he's not that great of a footballer. Tommy Conway works his arse off and is also a very good striker at this level. And I saw a tweet actually, which really like made me laugh, but I massively agreed with it. And it was basically that Tommy Conway, the biggest compliment I can give him is that he reminds me most of one of the strikers that we would have had in the promotion season. And I can see it because he's just Mr. Reliable, really. He just does his job to a certain level where he's not even a concern. It's not, if we get a chance, will Tommy Conway take it? Yes, he might, you know, he had his miss at Stoke, and there's a few times where he could have done better with chances. But in terms of where Middlesbrough are at, I think the biggest compliment I can give him is the fact that we're not missing Emmanuel Latilas because he's doing that stellar of a job. And his personality, we all love it, don't we? I mean, he seems to literally just be the main man in the dressing room. He's constantly laughing and joking, but you know, there's nothing to be laughed at in terms of his performances. What a piece of business! Because I've got to give the recruitment team some praise there. He is. You can now see why so many teams in the Championship were absolutely desperate to get their hands on him, and I'm delighted it was us because what a person! And yeah, he's a great striker at this level.
Yeah, as you say, great character, good enough finisher for the level, definitely. Well into double figures now for goals. His finish on Friday night was as good as I've seen all season from a Boro player, really. Yeah, it is fantastic, and hopefully he can continue that well into the final six, plus maybe extra games of the season. That would be very, very nice, especially if we play Bristol City at some point.
Yeah, that certainly would be interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think we're gonna add an extra 10 minutes onto the podcast of kind of looking at every result and seeing how teams got on. Mainly it was only Bristol City that actually picked up a win. So they've gone level on points with us, but for the most part, results went our way. Everyone, you know, is kind of aware of what other teams did and what the league table looks like now. But yeah, for the first time, I mean, we sit same number of games played, sat in fifth in the table, and I'm still very much holding within getting carried away. I think my real judgment on whether this is just a kind run of fixtures and we've done enough because we've got enough quality in the team, I'm kind of at the moment still leaning towards that a little bit, and I'm enjoying it. Don't get me wrong. I think Tuesday night, if we were to get a result, will be when I start to turn the corner a little bit and think actually something may have really changed here. And to be honest, as much as it's a different challenge, I'd also group Millwall into that. These next two games, if we come out of them still, you know, within touching distance of the playoffs and potentially in the playoffs, at that point, I think my confidence levels will skyrocket, to be honest.
Yeah, I know it's cliche, and obviously every week and every game is massive from now on, but this feels like a very serious week in terms of fixtures, especially when you look at, well, Leeds at home. You know what Leeds can give you, especially with the quality that they have littered across the team. But yeah, it's a funny time of the season, especially when it gets to this point. They are where they are in the table, and since that Sheffield United win that they had, at the end of February, where they were 5 points clear at the top of the championship. It was sort of
It
from
was it was
a
inconceivable that this could happen.
yeah, it was beyond everyone that they were going to end up in March time, end of March, start of April. They'd be in a position where not only had they gave up that 5 point lead that they had at the top of the championship, but now they literally can't slip up
It's
again.
not in their hands anymore, is it?
It's not, yeah, it's as I say, it's not in their hands. They can't slip up. They have since that point won one league game in six. Okay, granted, drawn four of those, but those points that you continue to drop have just been chipped away at and chipped away at by Burnley and Sheffield United. And as you say, Leeds find themselves in a position now where they have to win. They have to win. They have to turn it on. And in that sense, it could play in our hands a little bit. We could be able to catch them on a transition, catch them on the counter. Yeah, fingers crossed we can capitalize on that. My feelings overall on playing Leeds aren't necessarily the most confident, especially the last couple of years where the games we've had have been very end-to-end basketball games, and both times or all times we've come out on the wrong end of the result. They've got players that can hurt you, players like Dan James, Manor Solomon, Nonto. Our good friend Patrick Bamford's back fit
Of
and
course it is.
played half an hour on Saturday afternoon. Yeah, it would be fantastic to get a result, and I'd say that now, sat here on Sunday night, I'd snap your hand off for a point from
Yeah.
Lee,
It it
100%.
it feels okay, we're in a better position than what we were at the point that we played them last season. But it is very similar in terms of standings and what's at stake in terms of, what Leeds need to do in terms of getting promoted to the Premier League and basically us keeping our playoff charge on the rise, I guess. But very similar to the game last season. And obviously they come out on top. I think there's a debate to be had as to, I think in terms of their front four individually, it's not too much of a debate, I guess. I think they definitely had more individual sort of star quality in their team last season, with the likes of Somerville and Jorginho Ruta as well. It's a really interesting one because I think genuinely, had Meslier been in goal, I actually would have probably put my neck on the line and said, I actually quite fancy us to get a result. But I honestly believe it changes their dynamic and certainly strengthens them just not having in the team that much, that it's almost like reduced my belief that Middlesbrough can go and beat Leeds. And look, Caldalo's not kind of Manuel Neuer, but he's a very, very capable championship goalkeeper, someone that Middlesbrough have tried to sign countless times. And just having probably those moments when, for example, last season, Latilaf lobs him, has a strike from the edge of the box, and he gets a fingertip and can't quite keep it out. If I was a Leeds fan, my mind would be on Mars that it's taken all the way up until now for him to be dropped because he's been getting away with murder for a long time. But yeah, in terms of what we have to offer, it's going to be a really, really interesting one. As I say, I'm almost reserving judgment up until Tuesday night and obviously Saturday as well, that we'll get on to. But I think they're real, not only in terms of just quality and, playing against opposition, which have got good players. It's a real test of this Middlesbrough team's character. And if they really have learned and changed, or if it's been somewhat, as I say, favourable fixtures, individual quality getting them through games. And I think in fairness, so far, I said it last podcast, earlier on this season, we were playing teams that we should have beat and getting points or losing to daft goals. That's one area that we've improved on. I think in the next 2 games, going to somewhere like the Den, and then also, Leeds are going to bring however many thousand. I'm sure that atmosphere will be excellent. It's now time for this Middlesbrough team and Michael Carrick and his coaching staff to basically put down even more of a marker than what they did on Friday night and say, actually, no, this isn't just, hitting form at the right time and a little bit of a favourable run of games. This is actually, we've found something within this group to essentially start providing results that we were kind of all expecting from the first whistle of the season, really.
Yeah, I think definitely Tuesday night is going to be, well, it's as difficult a test as you're going to get really throughout the entire season. A Leeds side that will be bubbling with a little bit of nervousness, but obviously the fire in their belly to put things right, put the narrative right around their football club at this time of the season. And in terms of Millwall, it's frightened me a little bit that I looked at the league table yesterday and they're 6 points behind us. Where have they come from?
Yeah.
Where have they come from? Because they were miles away. Your usual bog standard championship side that just happily float along. And yeah, 6 points behind us now. Obviously, their main man leading the line is on loan from us, so he won't be playing on Saturday afternoon, Josh Coburn. But they do have Aaron Connolly
Oh, God, don't. Let's just not
been,
go
been,
there.
been starting games for Millwall off the left-hand side. And also another slightly Middlesbrough link with Langstaff, who could possibly be the replacement for Coburn in the side if Ivanovic is moved further forward to play as a centre forward. And your favourite player, George Saville, obviously pulling the strings in midfield.
Yeah,
So,
let's not get into that one. Yeah, I think in terms of, like, as you say, they've under Alex Neil, they've gone certain football clubs, and I don't mean this as a criticism at all, because I think certain clubs have a certain way, a certain style, a certain kind of philosophy when it comes to football. And Millwall are, and it's not, as I say, it's not a criticism. If anything, it's me praising them. They are good at being a physical side that rough you up, are relatively direct, and basically, if you're not up for it, will run all over you and bully you in games, to be honest. And that's why for so long you've seen some of the names like your Jake Coopers, like your Savills, that essentially George Honeyman, sorry, they've been in that team for what feels like probably the best part of a decade. And yeah, I think more so in terms of, because I don't really question that this Middlesbrough team will be able to get up for the Leeds game. I think that's a given. At least I'd like to hope so. But I think going to Millwall, yes, okay, the 6 points behind, but it's the environment, it's the atmosphere, it's everything that comes with going away to Millwall. It'll be really interesting for me because it's still a relatively young team that we have. So it'll be very interesting, as you say, using these 2 games to see if this Middlesbrough team is really turned a corner.
100%. Yeah, I think coming out of this week, if you could come out with 4 points, that would be incredible to see where we'd be at the end of the week with that points tally would be fantastic. But I'm going to be honest, I don't think that 2 draws would be the end of the world.
Yeah, it's so difficult. I guess on the face of it, no, it wouldn't be the end of the world because you're playing against 2 very good teams. But then it does also mount the pressure on you to go to the likes of Sheffield Wednesday. Okay, we've still got Plymouth to play as well. But I think looking at the teams in and around us, they're two games where, I don't know, I feel like it's that weird kind of scenario where even if you lose one and win one, it's 3 points. At this stage of the season, you're looking for points rather than, on the face of it, like you say, though, two draws now, and you think, yeah, okay, 2 draws against good teams and difficult circumstances, but I think it's just about points at this stage of the season. So it's really interesting. What I'll finish on is what I finished on last week, just in terms of not specifically just Leeds, but from impacts from bench, injuries, different things to consider in terms of personnel. I think for the most part, you kind of know what you're going to get from Michael Carrick in his starting 11 at the moment. Is there any components of that team that you'd potentially be looking at possibly tweaking one or two individuals?
No, go again.
I think in fairness, as much as you say, it certainly doesn't look natural. He doesn't look really comfortable on the right. Bergsorg is probably the only one. But even then, I feel like against Leeds especially, his work rate, the type of player that he plays on the edge, the man for the big occasion. I do think a game like that will suit him. And I feel like going to Millwall, hostile environment, as much as Morgan Whittaker's done very well off the bench, and you know, it's probably tempting for Michael Carrick, I probably would stick with Bergsorg as well. So yeah, I'm very much in the same boat. Is there anything else that you want to touch on, Nathan, or is that us for this week? Ready for another exciting, typical Championship Saturday, Tuesday week, where by next Sunday we might be crying into our microphones, or we might be drinking on the podcast thinking, is it still time? Is there still enough time where we can put together a late automatic charge?
Yeah, it would be great to be sat on here next week with a beer after 6 points from 6. It would be. I'm not crossing my fingers in anticipation of that, but I am crossing my fingers, hoping that we can come out the week with another couple of positive results that keep us well in the mix, because sitting pretty in 5th is quite nice after where we have been in the last couple of weeks. But look, no one would have expected us to be here this time 2 weeks ago after Luton coming on here and speaking about a 0-0 draw, which we were absolutely battered from pillar to post at Kenilworth Road. So to come on here 2 weeks later, be sat in 5th position, I suppose you could sort of say it's in our own hands.
Well,
But
it is. We've got something to lose now. We've gone from being in a position where we've been the chasers for weeks and weeks and weeks, and now it's our position to lose, really. So I guess there's that
it is.
mentality shift that hopefully it produces even better performances.
Yeah, it is. I think what I would urge is just enjoy the ride, because it's not going to be plain sailing. 100% it won't be plain sailing. There will be bumps in the road, 100%. And yeah, we'll wait and see what this week brings. But it's very exciting that Boro, just as they're losing touch with you, they just haul you back in right at the last second.
Yeah, it is quite frankly nothing other than just typical Middlesbrough Football Club, isn't it? So yeah, we've got another week of typical Middlesbrough Football Club to look forward to. Let's see what they have on offer. Let's see what that Tuesday night under the light at the Riverside brings. It's always a feisty affair, and the atmosphere, I'm sure, will be excellent. And then also a trip to London. So yeah, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Boropolis podcast. As always, you can support the podcast by liking and subscribing if you're watching on YouTube. On audio platforms, please don't forget to give us a rating and a review. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast, and we will see you again next week.